Congresswoman, thank you for joining us.
It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you.
I pose this very difficult question to you. $20 billion is a lot of money. I understand that the military complex does require a pretty hefty check. We need to stand by Israel with Iran shooting off threats, but doesn't this aid package put us deeper into war in the Middle East?
Well, it does create that's a legitimate question. Now, what I will say is that Congress is the one that actually appropriated the money for the Israel aid package. Earlier this year, about 2 months ago, we voted on the supplemental aid package, which included $14 billion of additional aid to Israel to help them in terms of, for example, restocking their Iron Dome and those sorts of things. Now, what was troublesome is that the Biden-Harris regime has been withholding that money and withholding those resources. Obviously, they are now privy to additional information in terms of what Iran is trying to do in terms of stirring the pot in the Middle East. And so they clearly understand that they've got to be releasing the funds and the resources that we have already approved as as Congress.
Well, pardon my skepticism when it comes to the Biden-Harris administration and its allegiances in Israel, but they've been very anti-Israel. If you look at their words say one thing, but their actual policies say another. This is ostensibly an example of Biden actually talking the talk and standing with Israel, but I'm sure there's some question marks inside some of this release in aid that you might have as a lawmaker.
Well, absolutely. As I indicated, they've been slow walking and withholding the very aid that was approved by Congress, which not only is a violation of the law that was passed, but also not within their authority to do. So, yes, I've had serious questions about the Biden-Harris commitment to the country of Israel. What they've done just in terms of the policies associated with Iran itself is why we're in the situation that we are. When President Donald Trump was in office, the leadership in Iran was going broke, and we were hopefully going to be able to have an internal overthrow of the Iranian government, which so many people in Iran don't support. Since the Biden-Harris regime came into office and lifted the sanctions against Iran, they have made over $100 billion in oil sales money throughout the world. And so I would point to the Biden-Harris regime as being one of the primary causes as to why we're in the situation we're in the first place. I do not believe that October 7th would have happened if President Donald Trump were still president. I believe that Iran is able to fund all of its proxies, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or Qatar or other countries. They have been able to fund these nefarious actors because of the $100 billion that are now that is now in their coffers with international oil sales.
Oh no, those are great points, and I think that they're correct ones. You don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to recognize that something deeply changed in the Middle East with the changing of the guard at the White House. And another point too, I've spoken to former State Department people, and they point out the fact that the Biden administration removed the CIA Iran mission desk and just eliminated it altogether once Biden took office, as if in a clear message saying like, oh, we're not really concerned about Iran as far as the CIA is concerned.
So I'm old enough to remember the 1979 Iranian Revolution. And I was concerned back then as a junior in high school as to what this situation portended into the long distant future for what was going to happen in the Middle East, and especially in regard to women's rights, especially in a country like Iran. And now 40 years later, we can see that my concerns and misgivings as a 17-year-old were entirely legitimate. That's why I have always been so curious as to why Obama, Biden, and now Biden-Harris have taken the position that they have in propping up Iran. Because I've known for decades that Iran is a malign actor. They have created chaos in the Middle East. They sow chaos in the Middle East. They chant death to America. They took our hostages 40 years ago, and it was only with the election of Ronald Reagan that we were able to get them back. They have just wreaked havoc across the world at every single opportunity. And yet, under both Obama and Biden and Harris, at every turn they take their side. It makes no sense. So you just really have to start following the money and start trying to figure out out why in the world the Democrats would side with a country like Iran. They do not believe in women's rights. They do not believe in gay rights. They do not believe in prosperity for the people. They are a tyrannical government that have literally forced their citizens to live in abject poverty for decades and decades and decades. And the Democrats don't seem to care.
No, I remember so well the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, and how hopeful they were that there were 2 or 3 internal revolutions, separate revolutions that were kind of bubbling up, and there was going to be this internal overthrow of the government in Iran. That would have been the ideal situation. But, lift the sanctions, Biden walks in, and it becomes a completely different situation. I have a question for you. I think that you're particularly situated to answer. You've long been a fighter of America First policies. And so there is this fundamental issue with saying that we're going to be America first, we're going to put Americans first and put American policy first, while also having to tend with all these conflicts that are very international in nature. How do you blend and merge and have these two agendas not clash?
Well, so I think that you have to understand what the international conflicts and which ones actually affect the America First agenda, and not every single one of them do. There are a lot of tyrants and dictators around the world, and there are going to be tyrants and dictators around the world. The question becomes which one of those actually threaten our prosperity and threaten the future of America. Now, what I would say about Israel, and especially when we see what happened on October 7th, and we now know that Iran is using proxies to again foment war and unrest in the Middle East. I truly look at Israel as being the tip of the spear in protecting Western civilization. Is that going to have what happens in Israel is going to have an impact in America. We need to make sure that we are protecting that ally and the Israeli and the Jewish people, because barbarism is not acceptable. And that's what we're dealing with Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah. What we saw take place on October 7th is so far outside of anybody's imagination as to what we thought we would be dealing with in the modern era in 2024. So I think that when you're dealing with people who would do what they did on October 7th, what you have to recognize is Western civilization itself, with the United States in the forefront, we have to defeat this level of hatred, this level of tyranny, this level of barbarism, to use that word again. So again, you have to pick and choose which one of those international conflicts actually are going to have an impact on us into the long term. So that's why I'm always saying that a weak America makes for a very dangerous world. A strong America makes for a safer world. That's why you go for and why you protect and you work towards a strong America and America First policy. Because what we do here has an impact internationally. All you have to look at is what happened when Biden and Harris withdrew from Afghanistan 3 years ago now. What that did is that demonstrated to the world that America was a very weak country, and that we were willing to allow the Taliban to take over $80 billion worth of our hard-fought treasure and kill 13 of our soldiers and Marines, and that we were willing to walk away rather than actually defend what we had been fighting there for 20 years. And it portrayed a level of weakness that I believe that is why Russia invaded Ukraine. I believe that that's why October 7th happened. Yep. So you have to look at what we do here and how it impacts international relations, at the same time that you always have to be doing things like fighting for energy security, energy independence, energy dominance, making sure that we have the resources not only for Americans' prosperity, but to be able to export that so that other countries do not have to buy their oil from Russia, Venezuela, and Iran. Why would we want to put the kind of money into their pockets that we have by destroying our own domestic energy production? But that's what Biden and Harris have done. They have destroyed or tried to destroy our energy industry, domestic energy industry in the United States. And all that does is empower tyrants, dictators, and despots.
And it's a great point. And at the end of the day, the next administration does have to play cleanup. even if you have an America First agenda, you still have to clean up the mess that was created by a non-America First agenda, which was the last 4 years. Before I let you go, Congresswoman, I know that you're back home. Wildfires are tearing across your state. You've been personally affected by it. Your homestead burned down. I'm so sorry to hear that. How's your family doing?
Well, my family's doing well. I grew up on a ranch about 100 miles north of Cheyenne. One of the biggest fires in Wyoming was in that area. It burned about 30,000 acres. Not all of that was on our ranch, but we did lose quite a bit of our grass, quite a few trees, a lot of fences, miles and miles of fences. And yes, the homestead that I grew up in when I was a younger child, up in what we refer to the hills in the Haystack Hills, that did burn to the ground. That was a huge loss. It was right on the Cheyenne to Deadwood Stage Trail from the 1800s. But as my brother said, we didn't lose any cattle. We didn't lose any horses. Nobody got hurt. The community came together in a way that is just absolutely unrivaled. It really gives you hope for the future, the way that people help each other, care for each other, what these communities mean. And it's been a sad couple of weeks, but at the same time, other people suffer worse than we did. You always have to think about that, and you always have to think about the positives. So it has been tough in Wyoming. It's been tough for a lot of people, but again, the grass will grow back. We'll be able to fix the fences, and you just have to have a positive attitude about everything.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's Wyoming grit on full display right there. I love it. Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time.
Thank you.